We are back with another episode of Life in Law. And today, our special guest that we have with us is Michael. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. That's Michael Sobota. I don't mind saying full names and like that. Let's see.
Yeah. And maybe can you just start off by just telling everybody just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you. My name is Michael Sobota. I'm 62 years old. I started a business when I was 19 years old in the basement of my parents' home. And that business happened to be a debt collection agency because that is something I did while I went to high school. My brother became my partner in that business, and we grew the business to where we had 200 employees in Bethesda, Maryland. And that business is called Pierce, Hamilton, and Stern, Inc. And we had basically, it was the American dream, essentially, where myself and my brother were each making $1 million a year each, and started having children, and everything seemed great. And so I had 2 children in 2003 when my father died. And my brother approached me and he said, I want to invest an extra $20,000 a month each into a new line of business in our company. And doing so would cut my salary in half, right? With my new baby and my new $850,000 house and no furniture. I just bought it. And so my brother said, if you don't want to do this, then we'll have to go to war legally and split the business. And at that point, I had to move out of that 6,000 square foot home in Gaithersburg, Maryland, because my brother was forcing me into a legal battle. And the mother of my first 2 children was just going to move back in with her mother and take the kids, because she basically was joining the scheme against me. And as hard as that is to believe, FCO is worth $50 million now, of course, and it became the target of the $8 billion behemoth Appfolio, where my former employee, Carol Bloom, works, and where Carol Bloom has been trading material insider, non-public information since 2015 when the company was born, and 2016 when Philip Niles was murdered in the crime. And the stakes become so high, Theo, that they were after me in 2013 on my 50th birthday. There were 74 people in the little quaint Bayside, Maine community. And I was seated at the table of honor because it was my party for my birthday. But these people knew that I was being made a fool because there were 2 police officers at my table who had retired from the Florida Police Department. And they were already working with my wife and my lawyers and my CPAs and my mother to essentially kill me. Nicely, right? To kill but pretend you're not, right? To take everything and pretend that it's something else, right? And so now there must be 60 people on this list of monsters, because this crime has been growing every single day since 2013, when those 74 people, most of them at the party, knew that I was a target.
All right, so I'm
That-
just gonna
right?
interrupt for a second. So
Yeah.
just to kind of make sure that we're on the same page here. So
Yeah.
you're talking about a lot of different things here. So now, how many kids did you have altogether?
So at this point, I have 5 children. So in 2013, I only had 2 children, and I ended up in a custody battle over those children because we weren't even married. And I noticed that my executives had somehow maneuvered my custody battle to where my entire general ledger of my company, which is 2 feet thick of paper for the year, was sitting in the court. And they were going through every transaction the company made, which is $30 million
Okay,
worth of
so
transactions, right?
when you say your financial information about your company was in the court, was this something that your attorney provided, or
Yes, I realized what happened is Ron Cantor was already deeply involved in this crime, working directly with my wife, but he was my own attorney. He was my general counsel. But he was working with my executives and my ex, she wasn't even a wife, Heather Taylor, and my mother and my brother, because this was now my own company, where me and my brother had split that 200-person company in 2. And now I had my own company that was all in my name. But these guys, including Ron Cantor and my brother, began working day one of my new company to steal the whole thing from me and take it back. And they have taken it all the way to this point, because when I left Maine on my birthday, essentially, and on my 50th birthday, that's 12 years ago now, these executives, my lawyers and my CPAs, were hot and heavy after me with law enforcement, essentially telling the police that they were investigating me, but I'm the owner of the company and they work for me. Right? They had the police believing that they have to investigate me because I'm somehow doing something wrong, but I wasn't. Of course, I just had a $50 million company and they want to steal the whole goddamn thing. And they did.
at this point,
Yeah, Ron Cantor. Yes.
okay. So at this point, you hired this attorney, Rob Cantor, to represent you.
Ronald S. Cantor
Okay.
of Rockville, Maryland, and Fort Myers, Florida. So
Okay,
Ronald S. Cantor.
and then you go through the custody battle, and when you see that this, hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on. So when you see
Yes.
that the lawyer is allegedly working with your ex and working against
Yes.
you, you fire him?
No. Ultimately, they had me believing that I was getting a fair deal. And the judge gave me 50-50 legal custody of these 2 kids. It's just that the day I got that custody, they simply ignored it.
And when you say they ignored it, what do you mean by that?
They never allowed me to see my children. I think I had 1 visit.
So
they carefully engineered it and just ignored me completely.
Okay, so which court was this, and who was the judge?
Yeah, this was Circuit Court of Rockville, Maryland, and the judge was the first. She was the first Black judge appointed by my classmate at Gonzaga, who was the governor of Maryland. I can't even remember his name.
What's the judge's?
Her name is escaping me. This is 2016 now.
Okay,
but I'll get back. I'll be able to give that. But
Okay, so hold on. So in 2016, she orders you to have 50-50 joint legal custody, but what about physical custody or visitation? Was that
Yeah,
mentioned?
generous visitation. Generous visitation is what I had. And it's what they did is they simply ignored that. And so by the time I finally fought through, it took 3 years to fight through this, and I essentially had to sell everything that I had up in Maine to pay for the legal battle. And I didn't realize that that's all part of the game. They wanted me broke. They wanted all my stuff sold. And what they were really attacking was my business. The executives and the lawyers were working with my ex and to take my kids and my business. In other words, fight him so much over the kids that we're able to scoop up that business. And so by the time 2013 came around, there was the party. I had an 11-year-old and a 15-year-old. And the judge in Maryland awarded $10,000 a month child support after this $150,000 trial that I went through. And so then I had one visit with my daughter, and by then I was already with Laura. And Laura is someone I met in Florida, and I met her at a strip club. So Laura worked at Stars in Orlando, and she worked for Charlie and Jim Weigel. And she was friends with the family, and I didn't know what that is. I didn't know this means lawyers, judges, child trafficking. It means Epstein Island, essentially. Anyway, she was someone who was, turns out, was a confidential informant, and that on November 15th, she had double cocaine charges, and they null prossed them. And null pros, I believe, turned into confidential informant, and all of a sudden, I've got this red hot girlfriend. But her real mission was to help the lawyers and the police take my business from me.
How did you know that she was an informant?
Well, I've learned because of the twin cocaine rap and because she attacked me 8 times. And when she kept attacking me, the police would go like, oh, what is wrong here? In other words, I've got a video of Laura telling the police if I return to the house, she's going to murder me. And the police are like, what the fuck? And they turn to each other and they say, oh, this was April 13th of 2021, right in the middle of, when she was going to attack me one more time. And she told the police she was going to murder me. Well, they said they're going to have to talk to their sergeant because this is off the hook. We can't have a woman with a gun saying she's going to gun down her husband. And she's got 3 kids sitting there with her. Well, she's saying it, right? And this is a 911 call. This isn't just any call. This is a freaking 911 call. Anyway, the police went offline to talk to the sergeant, but of course, you know what they found out from the sergeant? That she's a confidential informant and that she's working a case.
So they told you that?
No, oh, no. Theo, thank you. I do not have absolute hard evidence that she was a confidential informant. I simply know that she has been arrested 8 times for assault and battery. And the prosecutor dropped the case and decided they were going to charge me with domestic violence. And they did. Right? After her 8th arrest,
This was in
I was a
Florida?
bloody mess. What?
This was in Florida?
It was in Fort Lauderdale at my $5 million house, where I could park my 80-foot yacht in my backyard. But the lawyers and executives decided they like boats, they like prostitutes, and they like children. So they took it all of it. My yacht, my prostitute wife, my 3 kids, and my business. And they called it helping me. And the police showed up at my door on Father's Day in June 18th of 2021, because this was pre-planned. That Laura had come to them after being arrested on May 13th of 21. And she instead filled out a fake domestic violence injunction saying that on May 13th, 2021, when she was arrested, that it was me that attacked her. And Judge Stephanie Moon in Fort Lauderdale knew what she was signing when she signed that lie. And then the cops showed up at my door on Father's Day, because this was a June 11th order, but they waited until Father's Day. And they showed up at my $5 million mansion to kick me out of my mansion and my business, because all of my records were there and I ran my business from there, where I'm the CEO of the largest debt collection agency in that nation. This is an agency that this is a company that, like Appfolio, serves clients like Blackstone, BlackRock, and the big guns in the industry that all know me, right? And they know that the police and my lawyer and my executives and my own mother decided that they would take my $50 million company and my kids and not pay for it, while the Appfolio stock went from $20 when Philip was murdered to $220 where it trades today. And it's worth $8 billion. And the insiders who have been trading this information in about me and my babies since 2015 own $6 billion worth of that stock.
So I have a
They
question.
used the material non-public information to make that money. Yeah.
So question, you mentioned
Yeah.
you mentioned the house and the boat and the stuff like that, and you're saying that they
They
took
took
your
it all.
So
They just took it all, lock, stock, and barrel.
just so our listeners can understand, typically people will divide property when there's a divorce. But since you weren't married and this is just a custody case, I just would like
now I
to
was married. Now not only was I married to Laura, but I had a prenuptial agreement.
Okay, so wait, hold on. So Laura is a stripper you met in Florida, and then you married
She
her.
became my wife, and we had 3 kids.
So you had the 2 kids at first without a marriage, and then that was the custody thing in Maryland. And then after that, you didn't see the kids after you were supposed to get time with them, and you were paying $10K a month in child support. Then you go to Florida, you meet Laura, stripper lady, you marry her with a prenup, and then you have 3 more kids with her. So what did the prenup say?
Primarily the prenup said that the business is mine.
Okay.
All the money, I agreed to even split things that I had before I met her. In other words, I said we can split everything that's not the business 50-50.
So your prenup stated that any property or assets you had prior to the marriage, she was going to be able to split in the event of a divorce, except the business.
Yes. The business is mine.
And that's basically all it said. pretty much.
It said more. It said that because of that, I'll be able to afford to pay you an enormous amount if we split. That you can keep your your daily driver. You can keep $100,000 a year job for 6 years. You can get $100,000 a year for every year we're together. So that would be a $500,000. So it was promising much more than that. I mean, yeah. When we divorced, what made no sense is that if we sold all our stuff, she would have kind of ended up with nothing except that $1 million or whatever. That's not much, right? But that's more generous than not having a prenup. In other words, if I had no prenup at all, she would get less.
So
than what I was promised.
So then why did you do the prenup like that?
To protect my business, because I know that ultimately my business is worth $1 billion because I know what to do with the business, right? The business to me isn't just worth 20 million. On our prenup, I specified that the business is worth $14 million. And that's what we agreed to on the prenup. And based on that, that primarily what I wanted her to do is want us to build wealth together. In other words, own multi-million-dollar homes like our $5 million Fort Lauderdale home and our $2.4 million 80-foot yacht. The thing is that I hired Captain Jason Keffer to captain that yacht so I could be a conscientious executive and father to 3 children and safe, right? So I'm not some idiot crashing his yacht with his family on it, right? Anyway, and there was business opportunity here. Can you imagine having an 80-foot yacht in Fort Lauderdale that you can park that thing behind your house? Every person you meet wants to do business with you now, right? It's a different world. Anyway, Captain Jason Keffer started making $9,000 a month to captain my yacht. But unbeknownst to me, his wife is State Attorney Susan Keffer in Florida. And so him and his wife immediately were in touch with the same 2 cops that were sitting with me on my 50th birthday, right? Because now the captain of my yacht wanted me dead, right? Along with my wife and my executives and my lawyers and my CPAs. Everybody would join the party. I just can't even believe this is true, but it's all true, Theo. I mean, so this is what they did.
Can you explain what caused the divorce? Like with
Laura?
What
caused the divorce is that my wife was in it for the money. She was 22 years younger than me, and she was just like somebody you would hire. They would go home with you for money, and then they'd steal your Rolex, right? Or cut your throat, right? And steal your Bitcoin, right? Except my wife played the long game and the lawyers helped her. In other words, they said, we're your partners.
But
and
right?
Your job is to kill this man, feed him, kill him, make him think you love him, but kill him. Right. That was
so people can understand too, and just in case anybody else is in a situation like this, to know how these things transpire. So let's kind of go in the timeline here. So
you think of it as this. Sergio Pino is a known gangster in Florida. He's now dead, right? But he owns Century Builders or whatever they call that. It's a $150 million operation, right? It's political. So when his wife was attacked 4 times in Florida, right? Just like me, right? What do you think was going on there? What was going on there is that Sergio Pino is the confidential informant, right? He's a big-time gangster, and the cops were going to allow him to kill his wife if he wanted to. He just didn't get away with it. It's a bad business, right? When the cops get involved, when the government itself, my God.
Well,
So, let me tell, hold on,
okay.
Listen to this. Because when I realized what was going on, what do you think I did? I started calling the FBI, darling, right? I started calling the FBI, and I called the FBI 7 times, right? 7 times, begging for my babies because I knew, right? But the FBI knew too. Just like they knew about Virginia Roberts Guthrie, right? They knew. Isn't that sad? It's true. The FBI knew the whole time. So, of course, I don't call the FBI anymore now, do I? Right now we know why Bongino and Kash Patelev's, the funny look in their face, right? After an experience with the Department of Justice of the United States of America, right? It doesn't exist. But what does exist, Theo, is lawyers who will do anything for money. So that's where you get my business, and you get Appfolio that is now trading at $220. Now, mind you, they have lost $2 billion in market cap since I learned Carol Bloom works there. And my brother is deeply involved with that company as one of their primary partners, they call it. So Hunter Warfield, my competitor, is deeply involved with Appfolio that just happens to need me dead. And what Appfolio does to make these things happen is they use an investor club called the Investor Club, the investor group of Santa Barbara, California. And you know what that is, Theo? That's a bunch of bigwigs from Santa Barbara, California, where Appfolio is, but they went to university together, kind of like in Idaho, where the university is part of the problem. So the investor group of Santa Barbara was formed way back when, and they're worth $1 billion. And this guy, Maurice Duca, knows exactly what the game is, and that Carol Bloom has been sharing material, non-public information as they asked one judge after another to eliminate me as competition, because essentially the way that it works is that if I were to have a fair divorce, in other words, if my premarital agreement was honored, then Appfolio would be caught in a crime. All these folks would be caught in a crime. If the IRS doesn't allow them to lie, because there's a $4 million IRS debt now in my name, and they have all left me a pig for slaughter. There's $700,000 due to 5 creditors that's unsecured because I was surrounded by thieves when they took my yacht. They had no intention of paying for it. That turned into a $454,000 deficiency. And the lawyers all worked to maximize the damage because everything I had now was used against me. And this isn't all. When my divorce started, Theo, what they did is my corporation also asked for a divorce. And so the judge, Frank Leday, on November 12th, 2021, said yes. He said, I'm going to allow FCO Holding to hire a lawyer and sue for divorce from the 100% shareholder.
All right, so can I just interrupt
the asset protected by the prenup.
Okay,
what?
So I just want it for clarification, because I know you're saying a lot and I know it might make sense when you're saying it, but just for anyone listening and for me to understand, it's kind of hard to follow a little bit. So just to be clear, so what's the name of your company, and does it still exist?
Yes. So Fair Collections and Outsourcing is the main that's the company that the public knows, www.fco.com. But if you look up that company now, you're going to see Justin Evans' name on there, and you're going to see Adele Musa.
So FCO was created as a corporation? Was it an
100% as an S corporation? Yes.
You were the 100% owner.
I'm 100% shareholder and the only officer.
And was it ever publicly traded?
No.
Okay, so it was just private corporation, S corp.
Yes.
You were the sole. So then, who took you to court? The board members, or?
So then I had a divorce in Broward, and that's FMCE 21008-210. That's the Broward divorce, and they pulled me before Judge Frank Leday, and he said, "Why don't we take your corporation in for safekeeping?"
So wait, hold on. So that's the divorce, the matrimonial divorce from Laura, correct?
Yeah.
So before we get into that, so did she file or did you?
I did, after the attack, right?
Okay.
After.
And when you filed, you filed, did you have an attorney, and did she?
I did. When I filed, my attorney was Benjamin Older, and he is a Tampa lawyer associated with my brother. Essentially, my lawyer referred me to my brother's friend to be my lawyer.
Didn't know that at the time.
No. Even the guy who wrote my prenup for me was Ron Cantor's buddy. So Ron Cantor has planned this for 20 years. He probably had my picture and my children's picture on his refrigerator, because we all were going to be like lambs for slaughter. His family and his friends were going to take everything I ever had, and he was going to do it from the inside with the help of the judge.
And who was your ex-wife's lawyer at that time?
Paulina Forrest. So Forrest, and she is a notorious vixen. I mean, I suppose she's as pretty as Melania Trump with a law degree. And I guess that's how she does business.
Okay, so you file divorce, you go to that first court date and everything like that. And then when did they start bringing up assets and finances and trying to start targeting you over the assets?
Well, on October 11th, I provided a financial affidavit, and they pushed us into mediation. And at mediation, there were 10 people representing me, and my corporation was all there. And I'm like, guys, I have a prenuptial agreement. What are you doing? And they said, we have to make a deal. And they said, if you don't make a deal, we are all going to quit. Yeah.
So let them quit, right? Let them quit.
I fired them all. So I fired Robert Moritas. I fired my CPA, Edmund Gregory. I fired Ronald Cantor, who was working on a big CFPB case for my company and had been working on it for 5 freaking years. I had to fire all these people, and now I had no lawyer. So when Judge Frank Leday told me he was going to take my business for safekeeping on November 12th, 2021, I had no lawyer. I was pro se.
So, okay, so that day when the corporation, everyone was there, was October what?
That was October 11th, 21.
And then you didn't go back to court until November?
Yeah, on November 12th of 21. And there was stuff in between because meanwhile, my wife is trying to accuse me of violating the restraining order that goes with the fake DVI. Remember now, my $5 million home and my yacht became theirs.
Okay, so back up just for clarity. So this happened before the divorce happened. You were arrested, right?
For domestic violence. On June, so my wife was arrested on May 13th of 21. It was her 7th arrest. Mm-hmm. She's since been arrested for attacking her new boyfriend, Phil Caputo, in front of my 3 children and his 12-year-old, and his 12-year-old called the police.
Okay, but
right?
Then prior
that
to
just happened
was
in
it just
January of 24.
So, but there was one DV incident where she had you arrested, correct?
No. In other words, yes. So May 13th of 21, she was arrested. Mm-hmm. And then she went to the judge, Stephanie Moon, on June 11th of 21, a month later, and filled something out saying, you guys got it wrong. Mm-hmm. My husband did it to me, not the other way around. You arrested the wrong person. And so they literally slapped me with the DVI on Father's Day. That kicked me out of my house and away from my business too, and assumed I was guilty of these things too. In other words, now I'm not allowed to see my kids. What?
When you said the DVI, was that like an actual criminal charge, or was it just like a restraining order?
It was whatever they fill out. It was, in other words, they never adjudicated this. It was only used as a tool.
So you didn't get arrested and go to court and face a criminal charge?
No, well, I did because but they didn't. All they did is say, welcome to court. Thank you. We'll take your home, your yacht, and all your bank accounts because you're a bad guy.
Did that criminal case get done, or is it still open?
It's closed, and they dropped it. I mean, after 2.5 years of doing nothing,
so they kept it open.
Dropped it.
Okay, so because this is a very common tactic where they did a similar thing to me, where before they try to go in and steal everything and take your kids and all that, they'll first arrest you, put a restraining order of some type or protective order against you. So you now let me guess. The protective order said you're not allowed to go to the house, right? Yep. And she's a protected party, so she got to stay at the house, and you were forced to leave your house. And that's
not only that, I had to go to anger management. And when I leave my house, I'm leaving the place where I run my $20 million business too, right? So, you're not just kicking, you're kicking the CEO to the street and taking control of the business.
And so did you hire an attorney for that criminal charge?
I did. Turns out my neighbor at my $5 million Fort Lauderdale house was Robert Moritas. So all of a sudden, I've got this guy standing there with his Great Dane at my gate, because my $5 million waterfront house had a gate. And that guy is Robert Moritas. He lives 2 doors away from me. And it turns out he's one of the most notorious family law lawyers in Fort Lauderdale history, I guess. And, unfortunately, what that means, is like Godfather. I mean, it's not something.
So,
It's
so you
very
think
dark.
that,
It's very dark.
you think that hiring him was a mistake?
Well, he was such a evil criminal that he ended up with all this money. And he had, so the home was sold, the yachts were sold.
Oh, that's what I wanted to,
Cars were
that's what I
sold.
wanted to ask you. So like, so let's back up a second. So, you had the DV order in place, you go in the divorce, it's having court dates. And then at what point in the divorce proceedings did they say that they're going to seize your assets and sell them and liquidate them?
Very quite quickly, because the divorce started June 23rd. It started 2 days after the fake DVI, right? So as soon as I got the fake DVI, I was like, okay, I guess I'm definitely divorcing this woman. And so I filed, but this time I filed with Robert Moritas because Benjamin Oldham had dropped the ball. See, he was supposed to file a sort of DVI against Laura because even though she was arrested, he needed to file something to make sure she didn't beat me to it. But Benjamin Older was simply in on the scheme. He's located in the same town as my brother, and Ronald Cantor invited him into the scheme, and each lawyer just plays their part. So Benjamin Older intentionally didn't do that, and that allowed my wife to get to Stephanie Moon, who's just a child trafficker, right? And, they like this type of thing. They like their power, and they like to use it in the most evil way possible, I guess, pays the most money. So, so by November now, so in June, they filed the fake DVI. By November, they kicked me out of my house. By January, they removed me from my $1 million a year job at FCO and said, now we're just going to pay you $6,000 a month.
Wait, so $1 million was a salary that you were getting paid through the business, correct?
Yeah, and it's a salary that I had been making since 2014.
And how is it? So basically, you're saying that your board of directors of the corporation voted to.
I didn't have a board of directors.
So how could they make those decisions?
Because Judge Frank Ledet took my company into receivership, and he told Adele Musa and Justin Evans to simply replace me.
And this was the divorce judge who did this?
Yes.
And so even though you had a prenup, which basically said that that said that the business was off limits, even though you had that, they ignored that and still put your business into a receivership.
Yes. What Frank Ledet did, Theo, I'm trying to get out of this crazy light, but what Judge Frank Ledet did is he on November 12th, I've got the transcript of November 12th, and what he did is he was talking to Paulina Forrest, who, again, she's like a number 10 supermodel. And she's up there, and he says, well, what about a Ugarte receivership? He said, I think Mr. Sobota could use some help with his wonderful company. And Paulina Forrest says, well, Your Honor, as long as it complies with Ugarte. Well, you know what Ugarte is? Ugarte is me telling the judge, will you take my company from me? Because an orthodontist did that once. Because the company was only worth so much, he's like, well, why don't you guys run it and see how much money you make with it, right? Because you want to call me rich. But see, I didn't do that. I had a prenup protecting my company, and I was pro se. Okay. And the judge just kind of pretended like I asked him to take my business. And he said, thanks, Mike. We will. So we're going to put your business into receivership. And of course, we're only doing it in the best interest of the children.
And did you try to file an appeal or anything at that point?
What happened then is Robert Moritas weaseled himself back into the case saying, Mike, I can help you. Right?
So you trusted
And
you gave
I
him a
trusted him. I trusted Robert Moritas, and I trusted him. And so here we are in January of 22, and the receiver says, okay, we're going to take your $1 million of salary away, and we're going to give you $6,000. And meanwhile, we're going to give your wife $100,000 a month.
But what about like the profits? Like where were those going now?
There was no accounting.
So they just got to keep whatever they want.
They completely stopped delivering any accounting whatsoever. No bank records, no nothing. And
so
they've stopped to this day.
Your business, basically.
They totally took the $20 million business, put it in their own names, changed the bank accounts, changed the business licenses, because I'm licensed in 34 states to do business. Now I'm licensed in none. They replaced me. So I have no bank accounts anymore. They were all in my name. They put them in their own name.
So once this started escalating and all of this was happening, the divorce hadn't even been finalized yet. What were you thinking and what did you do after that?
Well, the lawyers surrounding me were all, and executives and CPAs were all saying, hey, we're trying to help you work this out. And in order to help you work this out, we need you to sign a power of attorney so we can talk to the IRS. And yeah, and work this out because there's a $4 million debt, and we can work. This is a marital debt, right? Of course, it is a marital debt.
Oh, wait, sorry. Was there a $4 million debt that you knew of, or did they just make that up?
Yeah. In other words, when we bought the $5 million house, I did a 30-year 2.9% mortgage, and I locked that thing in by putting down 1.6 million cash. But virtually all of that cash I had made in the stock market, and I hadn't paid Uncle Sam yet. And so we were moving into the house with full knowledge that there was $4 million due and that there was $10 million worth of stock. 10 million. 6 of it was in the company's name, and 6 of it was in my name, and Laura had her own million. And when the divorce started, they simply grabbed it all the stock, and ignored all the debts and said, you now make no money, and all these debts are yours.
But were they only able to do that because they tricked you into signing the power of attorney?
I never, the power of attorney was brief. I revoked it as soon as I realized that they were lying to the IRS. I essentially knew they were up to something. And so it helped me to gather hard evidence, which I have now, because the IRS was able to send me the documents that Edmund Gregory was sending to them, totally lying about the value of my business. In other words, they're saying, look, IRS, we can't pay you $4 million because Mike has nothing and his business is worth nothing. And so they're saying they've taken my $20 million business, and not only are they not going to have to pay for it, they're going to rip off the IRS and $700,000 worth of creditors in the process, and my kids are going to get nothing.
And so when you talk about how they sold the stock and did all that,
they didn't sell any stock. Yes. Schwab stock, the marketable securities. Yes.
That was all like part of the business, right? Because otherwise they can't just go in your personal accounts and sell things.
But they did. My personal account, what they did is the judge froze it. The judge said, you cannot touch your personal stock account.
And then what did they send that order to wherever your
Schwab
is, and then they just didn't let you.
Schwab just cuts you off just like that. Not only that, but my banker, Wells Fargo Bank, I had a 20-year relationship with these guys, right? I had been dealing with them. I had Marvin Clark was my banker at Wells Fargo. And I called him now because he knows what they've done. I mean, Wells Fargo is Appfolio's bank. So when my company was taken from me, my executives moved me from the very safe and secure, huge monster Wells Fargo, and guess where they moved me? Now my corporate accounts are with M&T Bank, a loser regional bank who's probably going to go out of business, right? So they have spent the last 4 years crippling my business from the inside, and then turning around and saying, you got to pay your wife $20,000 a month. Her latest thing is that she wants an income withholding order for $20,000 a month. And the judge is trying to decide on that right now. They want to give her.
How long were you even married? How long was she even married to you?
5 years.
And she didn't work at all the whole time?
No. And I was with her the whole time. See,
and 5 years is a short amount of time. Doesn't it usually go by like how long you're married?
No, these guys were trying to kill me with my wife every single day of my relationship with Laura. And Philip Niles of Daytona Beach, Florida, is now dead. He was similar to Laura. In other words, Laura is so pretty, right, that you could kind of make a Barbie doll out of her. And Phil Niles, that's an executive like me recognizes that, and you make that person your salesperson, right?
Mm-hmm.
Philip Niles was a guy I met, and he was cruising with me to find chicks, and the chick I found was Laura, right? But it turns out Phil, was kind of was used in the same sort of way. In other words, Laura started relationship with me, and she went to Phil and she said, dude, he's mine. I'm killing him and taking all his money. It's time for you to exit stage left.
Let me ask you a question. Was there ever life insurance involved?
Yes. So
Laura was the beneficiary?
Yes. And oh my God. So there was a $2 million policy, and my wife was attacking me. This was 6 months after Phil was murdered, and I didn't even know it. Let me tell you that. My wife made me not talk to Phil anymore. So Phil went out to California, where Appfolio is, and ended up dead.
So wait, I don't mean to keep interrupting you, but can you explain one more time how Appfolio is connected with your business?
Appfolio is very much like they are a provider of software services to the multi-housing industry nationwide, and they say worldwide now. So they claim, for instance, FCO is the largest multi-housing debt collector in the nation. We collect for about 1 million units, maybe 1.5 million or something like that, but not a whole lot more. But 1.5 million is a hell of a lot of units. In other words, when Equity Property Management, one of the largest multi-housing, they were our sole client, Sam Zell, you might remember that name. He's a famous billionaire. And Equity was our client, and we had exclusive, and they had 174,000 units. And so my company, FCO, is made up of these monster companies like Home Properties, like Invitation Homes, like a Berkshire Hathaway, or a client. And so in 2013, my executives got the bright idea and started colluding with my own attorney, Ronald Cantor, that they would all tell my clients that I had lost it and that I went back to drugs.
Had you used drugs in the past?
Pot and alcohol?
But it was never like
this is not.
You never had like an addiction problem where they would say
no. This came when I was 18 years old. I did but I needed to go to rehab. And I went to, we did pot, alcohol, and LSD, and we followed the Grateful Dead, right? And, a lot of people did that. But I didn't, like my classmates at Gonzaga High School in Washington, D.C., I didn't have a silver spoon, so I had to find my way out of this mess and make a living, and I did. And so that drug rehab experience, I actually went to an 18-month drug rehab, and I drank the Kool-Aid. I bought it hook, line, and sinker, right? And that's actually where I started my business. My brother didn't start the business. I started it on Backlick Road in Springfield, Virginia, within the confines of Straight Incorporated, the drug rehab. And that is the drug rehab where Nancy or Princess Diana visited with Nancy Reagan, because we were the students. We were the kids. And a drug rehab is supposed to be a good thing, right? So I started my business there, and essentially the lawyers and my brother and the executives all decided that they could use this old story and put me into a guardianship in Florida.
And so they did?
Well, they tried. And so a year before the divorce, here we are living in Ormond Beach, and we're living the life. We've got 2 kids, a waterfront $1.6 million house with a boat in the backyard, and it was just glorious, cheap. The all-in mortgage with insurance, I think, was $7,000 a month, and we're at waterfront Ormond Beach. Well, all of a sudden, 5 cops arrive on April 30th, 2020. And there's a report that I have been talking about killing babies. Mind you, my wife is 8 months pregnant with our 3rd child. That there's been a report that I'm talking about killing babies, and that I've got an arsenal of weapons and a particular problem with officers and service people in uniform. So the cops came there expecting a barricade. Yes, but I was riding my one wheel around my property, having the time of my life, enjoying my babies and taking responsibility for the babies, because my wife is 8 months pregnant. I mean, she's ready to have a baby, except that is when my corporation and her chose for go time. So when those 5 cops came, they came because Ronald Cantor, Edmund Gregory, Carol Bloom, Stephen Sobota, Mary Sobota, Laura Sobota, my wife, and all of these people had decided that this is how they were going to do this to me. And so for the next 14 days, they took me to the Vines in Ocala, Florida, and pretended there was something wrong with me, right? There's something wrong with you. So in 14 days, here I'm going to court, against a guardianship. My wife has said I need to be institutionalized for life, apparently, essentially. And my lawyer, Ronald Cantor, was representing me, right? But he's actually in on it. And so Ronald Cantor got me out of it because the judge was like, what the fuck? You guys haven't really accomplished your plan or your crime, because there's nothing wrong with me. And so I got out, and here it's the same month where I made $2 million extra in the stock market. So the executives were all trying to pull a game with me. And they said, Mike, it's COVID, and we're going to be broke forever. We're going out of business, man. And I said, what are you talking about? I said, we are in the finest financial condition in the history of the company. And in March of 2020, we had never been in a better financial position. So what I did when they told me we're doomed because of COVID, I took $2.5 million and I bought 700,000 shares of Alcoa stock at $7 a share. And I became 0.6% owner of Alcoa.
And what's
right?
Alcoa?
They're a multi-billion-dollar company, right? But their stock was such a good deal that I not only bought 700,000 shares for $2.5 million in 30 days, I margined it 100% and got double. So now here I am getting out of the vines at Ocala, and I'm making $1 million a month extra in the stock market. And my wife takes me back and says that it was all hormones because she's pregnant, and that I actually moved to Maryland and started filing for divorce. And my wife sent me 7 love letters saying, I can't have this baby alone. I love you, and blah, blah, blah. They needed me back in Florida to murder me. And even worse yet, my mother knew this because that's where I went in May of 2020. So here I was at my mother's house making $1 million a month extra in the stock market. I just doubled the value of my company. In other words, my company is worth about 15 million. Now I've got another 15 million here because this Alcoa stock is just going to $56. I bought it at $7, right? But my mom wanted me dead, and her boyfriend wanted me dead. They were going to play this game no matter what. In other words, they had already been doing this to me since 2013, and they were going to play it through no matter what. So I went back to Florida, and we had 14 Nest cameras on the property because I knew something was up, right? And I had just hired a local guy, Jonathan Carolyn, and he was my top contractor who I paid $75 an hour to cash. And so I hired him into my business because I didn't really feel safe. And I wanted somebody near to me who was smart, but who wasn't one of them, right? So I hired Tyler Carolyn into my business in May. Well, they needed him gone immediately. So my wife approaches me and says, I hate this house and I hate Daytona, and we have to leave. And of course, here I am making $1 million a month extra, and I'm ready to now live the Fort Lauderdale dream. So I say, honey, let's get on that yacht and go. And so we got on our 54-foot boat and we left the entire scene behind. But I didn't know I was getting on the yacht with a killer, but I was. My wife needed me dead, and the whole corporation was now cheering her on. All of Appfolio, BlackRock, everybody needed me dead. And every time I was attacked. They all cheered, rallied. The nanny was in on it. The captain was in on it. Susan Keffer, the state's attorney in Florida, was in on it. My own lawyers in Florida were all in on it. And my executives and CPAs were all in on it. It was just unbelievable. But here I am cruising down to Florida with my wife and 3 kids now. And we anchor that boat near Marathon. And I hop on the dinghy, sure that little bitch is going to start. And I floated away from the big boat at about 4 knots going downstream. And I had no life jacket and the dinghy wasn't running. And there were no paddles. So I dove into the water and started swimming towards my 54-foot yacht with my wife and 3 kids. And my wife looked at me while I was struggling in the water. And she did nothing. She held the children as if she was busy.
Wow.
And I turned on my back and I floated away because I'm a survivor. Right? And I stopped struggling because I knew my heart wouldn't take too much, right? Anyway, I'd imagine at that point she called about 15 people to tell him, I think he's finished, or we've almost got him, right? And keep in mind, when we left for this trip, she snatched my iPhone out of my hand and tossed it in the water. Yes.
What?
Yes.
Trying to hide evidence?
Oh, yeah. Making sure I didn't document this trip. Wow. And keep in mind, she had 2 phones during the entirety of our relationship. I didn't know about this, but I know now. She had a second phone that she was using to communicate with Ron Cantor, Steven Sobota, Carol Bloom, and the multimillionaires. Even her family was in on it. Her brother got a $150,000 CNC machine for his race car business, and he doesn't make any money. How'd you buy a $150,000 machine, Jeremy? Huh? And just the facts are that my brother and even the Appfolio crime, see, they were buying Appfolio shares at $16, and those shares were turning into $300. All they had to do is kill me and take my kids, because that was part of Laura's payment for killing me, was that she got to keep the kids, and the lawyers and executives would all make sure they helped take the kids. And as a matter of fact, when Laura was arrested for attacking Phil Caputo in Palm Beach on January 26th of 2024, the kids were finally taken from my wife, right? And given to me. So I had my kids. So now they had to take them away. So my corporation went ex parte to the judge and asked Judge Viamontes to sign an order on May 25th, a Saturday, to take my children away, and she did.
And so this was the receiver acting on behalf of the corporation,
saying that I'm not a good dad.
But that's like, how could the business have standing to file that motion?
Only in Florida, and only for child trafficking. Because guess what the bad part is? The bad part, Theo, is that my daughter came to me on April 28th. Well, all 3 kids were standing there, and we were making a snack. And I've got this on video. But she said, Daddy, every time George takes us to the bathroom, he makes us suck his wanky.
And who's George?
George is the man who lived at 309 Little Miss Muffet Lane, Key Largo, while my wife was living 2 doors away at 423 Thumper Thoroughfare, in a home that seems to be designed for child trafficking that she could not afford. In other words, my corporation set her up in something that looks just like Epstein Island. And my children started being molested there on a daily basis.
But was she seeing this George or going there with the
Yes,
kids?
she was hanging out with him on his boat with the kids. And I've got photo and video of George with her and with the kids. And George was arrested by the United States Coast Guard on November 3rd, 2023, for firing his gun at another vessel. And this is the same boat my kids were on almost on a daily basis. And the weird thing about this is that Laura has a friend at the U.S. Coast Guard who happened to be in charge of that area, and that is Jess Guidrose and her girlfriend, Mariana Gutierrez, I forget the last name, Mariana, but these were family friends who became our friends in 2018 when Preston was 1, and we met them at Gymboree and just became close friends, but they were part of this scheme. And they were part of a Key Largo child trafficking scheme that, the whole state of Florida seems to enjoy. The judges know what they're doing, and they know, because when my kids were taken by Judge Francis Viamontes and my corporation on May 25th, my kids were about to meet with the third person about the sex crimes. In other words, they already met with Opalaka DCF. I already called the FBI, and the kids already met with Miami DCF, telling the same story of sucking the man's wanker every single day for 6 months. And so they elevated that to CPT, the University of Miami Child Protection Team. And my children had a visit scheduled for May 28th, I believe. I was taking them, right? And so now my wife didn't take them. She got the kids in that ex parte order, and they skipped that meeting. Now, my kids ultimately did meet with University of Miami Miller School of Medicine, the NGO responsible for this forensic examination. They met on August 6, 2024, because my wife was forced to bring them. And the University of Miami Child Protection Team called me and they said, "Sir, your 2 youngest daughters are positive for sodomy."
So they did like a medical exam and they did a forensic.
The whole thing.
And so what happened after they found it?
And that is the only system Florida has, right? Florida insulates the police department from child trafficking. They farm this out to an NGO so the children can be victimized again and again and again, and so that the people that they go to for help are just like Jeffrey Epstein.
And you said it was University of Miami that was doing it?
Yes, Miller School of Medicine.
It's so interesting that you say that, because even like in Connecticut, they're doing the exact same thing, where anytime there's a child sexual abuse investigation, the police outsource it to Yale University, which runs like the Yale Child Abuse Clinic. And then they do these forensic interviews. And it's like, my daughter went through 4 sexual abuse investigations in 2 years.
Yes.
And during those investigations, the detective never met her once. The detective never saw her, never met her, never spoke to her, but she claimed that she investigated, because all they did was outsource it to these things. And it's amazing that Florida is following the same pattern. Yes,
the university has become a predator, right? And that's not a surprise. The University of California at Santa Barbara is deeply involved with the Appfolio criminals.
And they're also nonprofits, so they don't pay taxes on all of this.
Yes. And let me tell you, when these guys at Appfolio, for instance, they are able to, they've got what are called Class B stock shares. And so while Appfolio has grown from $20 to $220 now in stock value, the company has earned more money from its appreciating stock shares than revenue in the business. In other words, yeah. So the owners, the public doesn't own Appfolio at all. The owners are able to have these extra shares, and they're called Class B stock shares. And so, here we are very recent in late 25. Klaus Schauser, one of the insiders at Appfolio, he sold 505,000 shares. Well, that is $110 million worth of stock. And you know how that shows up on the insider stock trading forums and reports? It shows up as 505,000 stock shares traded for $0. Zero. Because it's designed to be kept secret. That's the money. That's how they do it. It's just like printing money. So now
the SEC covers for a lot of these big institutional
just like
traders.
Madoff. They love them. They love them. I mean, let's think of Scott Rothstein. He was a wonderful lawyer in Fort Lauderdale, sitting on the grievance committee because he was running a $1 billion Ponzi scheme, pretending to be a defender of women nationwide for sexual harassment in the workplace. And that there were so many cases, and that his firm was so good at it that it was investable. And that was the Ponzi scheme, is that everyone invested in helping women nationwide. And of course, it was just a lie. Scott Rothstein, there were 70 lawyers, all working to cheat and defraud. But Scott Rothstein, he was a university professor in Florida, getting back to the university, right? Because the scheme started right there. And guess who his student was? It was Melissa Britt Lewis. And he started molesting her as his student, right? And then continued with the sex game while he built a $1 billion Ponzi scheme, right? Because that's how the business is. She ended up floating in a Florida canal, because that's also how the business is. It's a business of murder, right? Yes. They take, they kill, they transfer assets, everything. It's very, very similar to the movie The Firm. This is way before your time, but the movie The Firm with Tom Cruise is one of the greatest movies ever, and it's about organized crime. And that's what these lawyers do, is they commit organized crime. Alex Murdaugh had Judge Carmen Mullen in his pocket. And he was just doing one victim after another. The only reason Alex Murdaugh is in trouble is because he's killed like 12 people. It's not just Maggie and Paw, right, that he killed. He probably is responsible for Nancy Schaefer's death, right? She was she was Georgia Senator Nancy Schaefer, and she was saying the same things you and I say. And that is that there's something wrong. And she was saying it before all of Congress, the U.S. Congress. And you know what they did? They kicked her the hell out of town. And then her and her husband were murdered. Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. And one of the lawyers involved in my case, John Bedard, this scumbag, he is a Georgia lawyer. and he's connected with the CFPB, and the CFPB decided to gift these lawyers my company, essentially. They said, we'll help you take this multimillionaire out of his business. We'll separate him from his kids, and we'll all laugh and split the money, essentially. I mean, it's crazy. But, in doing this, they have shown me Oz, right? They didn't expect that I'd find Klaus Schauser, the billionaire, right? They didn't know I'd find BlackRock. They didn't plan on that. They didn't plan on me having the name of Maurice Duca and the investor group of Santa Barbara in the Appfolio scheme where Phil was murdered, right? Phil probably rode around in my brother's limousine, and they were laughing at Phil, telling him what a chump I am. And I believe Phil said, you better give me my money on his wedding day, right? And Phil was murdered on my wedding day, right? Wow. He was murdered at the same time that my company and my brother's company and Appfolio were all meeting in California at the National Apartment Association National Convention, where there's a huge, where all our clients meet, and where Phil knew all about the Appfolio scheme. And they were worried that Phil was going to give it away. So they filled him full of lead. He was shot 8 times in the front yard of some house. And they said, this was an interesting part because this sounds so much like my brother, right? The story was that Phil had gone to the girl and said, you want me. And you want me. And I know you want me. And she said, you don't know who I am. I'm connected to bad people. And all of a sudden he had 8 bullets in him, right? But that's not what happened at all. My brother knew the story that they would surround Phil with, and they were trying the same thing with me during those years. In other words, after Phil was murdered, they kept that a secret from me, and I started being introduced to dangerous situations. Me and my wife took the 54-foot boat out to the Bahamas, and we met a man out there who should be a family friend. Andrew Sweeting is the owner of the Abacos Marina with his family. And these people know my lifelong friends, Charles Hawes. And when I introduced my wife to him, he gave me the weirdest look, like he didn't want to know me, right? And my wife attacked me during that same trip while we were on anchor and tried to murder me. And she got on top of me, and I got very scared for my life, and I couldn't figure out what the hell was happening. And this was February 8th, 2017. I've got a video of, my wife sent, I took a video and essentially said, are you finished? Or are you going to try, are you going to try to finish me off here? And I took a picture of her because this is the same person who was never out of my bed, right? So the person who's attacking me is also the person in my bed having babies right? She was never not with me. And I enjoyed her, right? I was like, any of these guys, Leonardo DiCaprio, these guys love their young women, don't they? But I just didn't realize that they were laughing. I mean, she attacked me at the Bahia Mar International Marina on January 17th, 2021. And this was just when we were getting ready to close on the house. And here the whole marina knew this was going to happen because it was set up. And I didn't know. I was in my hotel room crying and calling my mother, and my wife had just attacked me, and I just couldn't believe it was happening. We were ready to close on our new house, and now, but it was all orchestrated. In other words, they didn't want me to close on the house. They wanted to take my business, take my kids, and finish the crime. But they didn't get away with it. That was January 17th. I was attacked again April 12th, and then I attacked for the final time on May the 13th. But, they really meant to kill me. And they just knew when I was attacked in the Bahamas, I called that an attempted murder. But I just hadn't put two and two together. I mean, I didn't put two and two together that Andrew Sweeting treated me that way because he knew I was supposed to be murdered on that goddamn trip, right? And this is all before she ever got pregnant. That all happened before she got pregnant, right? Then we had 3 kids. And I think the corporation essentially got with my wife and said, now you kind of have to have kids with him so he doesn't figure out you murdered Phil. Right?
So I think that there's definitely was a lot of red flags from the start, and it almost seems like this ex-wife of yours was targeting you from the very start. Before you even thought about getting married, you were a target, and they wanted to go after you for your money, your assets, and anything they could get out of you. And there's a lot of similarities I see from listening to your story with another friend of mine who tragically passed away last year, Elizabeth Harding Weinstein. And I think you mentioned that you also knew her as well. How did you know Lizzie?
It sends chills. Well, because my business has such extraordinary value and because I was living the life, I gravitate to the top of the heap, right? That's how I ended up meeting David Weigel. Whoever is doing this thing, that's where I belong. I want to, so when Marianne Petrie, that's how I got in touch with Marianne Petrie, is that I started hearing these different people tell their story, and I got directly with them. In other words, the story I read that was so compelling was Greg Ellis. He is an actor in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. And they did to him exactly what they did to me, where he came home and there were cops, and all of a sudden he was homeless. And he went from meeting with Disney executives and other heavyweights on a daily basis to plan projects with his children, right? He lived in that community with the Disney family and the, Brentwood or whatever the fuck it is. Anyway, he was homeless, and the police wanted him gone, just like me. In other words, his wife had worked a deal with all the higher ups, and they had decided that we are going to not only kick this guy out, we're going to take his money, we're going to take his kids. He won't even know what happened, but that's what they did. He wrote a story about it called The Respondent, right? And he explains the silver bullet technique. Greg Ellis started doing shows like you, where he thought there was a business in this, that he can be the respondent and that everybody in the United States is going to tell their story like this. But he found out that nobody wanted to hear his story, essentially, right? We don't want the truth, sir, right? So he, matter of fact, Kiefer Sutherland is recently in the news, and Kiefer is in the book because Greg Ellis got kicked out of his house, and he went to Kiefer Sutherland's house and said, man, you and I are foxhole buddies, right? Because we had this conversation for the past 10 years, right? And Kiefer Sutherland says, my wife says you got to go. I can't help you at all. Right? And now Kiefer Sutherland is finding himself in that same place, isn't he? Right? Because when a movie star is run out, it might be the exact same thing I'm experiencing. So when Gene Hackman and his wife ended up dead, right? Maybe it's because his own lawyer and his own people planned something for the last 10 years. And they didn't want his young wife to be left with all that money, right? And the same thing can happen to Rob Reiner and his wife, because money talks. And they like that money without paying taxes. They like to just transfer the documents and put someone else's name there. And that requires a body, right? It's best done with a body. In Florida, of course, you can do it with just a guardianship. So by August of 21 or 24, I had figured out the game, and I moved legally to Maryland. And these lawyers were unable to finish off this crime, because by then, Judge Frank Leday was just saying, well, or not Leday, Judge Jonathan Lott was just saying, look, guys, just do whatever you want, right? Just do whatever you want with them. We've already, committed so many crimes. But here I get to Maryland, and you can't just put someone in guardianship by having a thieving judge write order. There's got to be a medical need. But this is a business nationwide where lawyers, executives, CPAs, and the government find something to prey on. And then they swoop in and take it with the power of government, right? So my wife didn't do this to me. This isn't about Laura, right? This is about lawyers working with police officers in Florida, Maryland, and Maine. This is an international, because I own an international company in Philippines. I have 140 employees in the Philippines. But they took all of that just by calling this a receivership. And as soon as they got their hands on my company, they just started changing my name on everything and changed the bylaws immediately. And when they changed the bylaws in 2022, I went from being a multimillionaire my whole life to being broke. And they think it's funny. They do. They think it's funny. They think it's funny because they can do anything and get away with it.
Yeah, and it's not just the lawyers, it's not just the judges, it's not just the law enforcement. It's also a lot of these so-called advocates or people who are running these national movements and things like that. And I know you mentioned David Weigel. I'm just going to share my screen for 1 second here.
Sure.
Because
I gave my story on David Weigel's thing. It's still up there, unless he took it down. I didn't. I called out Ron Cantor.
So David Weigel was just arrested last Thursday. These pictures are pictures of what he did. He was charged with aggravated assault in the 2nd degree for brutally attacking a female victim who is the mother of one of his children's friends. And so you can see he brutally attacked this woman. He's facing charges now in the state of Connecticut, which he has yet to be arraigned. He should be having his arraignment at the end of this month. And that's just one example of, I've heard stories about him also, putting his hands on other women in the past. And so
it's even in his videos, you can see that when they meet, that he's overly hands-on. And but let me tell you something interesting, because when I heard about Family Court Fraud Warrior Project, and that David is a stock guy, and that Luthman is a former lawyer, these are heavy duty people and the kind of people I need to be with to get my story. Well, I immediately went to Elizabeth Harding Weinstein, because I said, Lizzie, if I belong here, you belong here, right? And you're a you're a prettier face than me, right? People respond to you. I'm an executive. I know these things. I mean, your story, Elizabeth, is as strong as mine, except you look like God darn, she was with Richard Gere way back when. The name is escaping me, but God, what a pretty face. Yeah, but yeah, and pretty is money. That's money. For a business, pretty is money, and everybody knows this. But it doesn't need to be bad, right? It's supposed to be good. It's supposed to be.
What was Lizzie's opinion of Dave Weigel?
That politically there was something wrong, that she couldn't get along with them because of who she is. And let me remind you who she is. She is someone who was telling me that her husband is Pizzagate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Her husband goes after his own children and likes to share his children with other heavy duty people. And remember, I went to Gonzaga High School, where my classmate was Governor Martin O'Malley of Maryland, and where the Page Boys scandal was a real thing, because Page Boys from Gonzaga were having sex with congressmen, right? And that was my high school. It was right there next to the U.S. Capitol. And the reason I went to school there is because my grandmother is Justine Shields. And for 30 years, she was the chief telephone operator at the U.S. Senate. So she handled the switchboard for the Congress, right? With 18 women who worked for her. Not a single man did this, right? And what she told me is that the U.S. Congress is like a frat party, and they chase the women up and down the hallways.
Wow.
Right? And she, worked her whole career doing that. And this is what I learned is true, right? I learned that our government is not accountable. They're not honorable. They cheat and defraud. And that's why we are $38 trillion in the hole and running a $2 trillion annual deficit, right? We have become pirates, right? So we now pirate and traffic other nations, right? We want your people and your oil, right? We'll traffic your children too, right? Why not? More kids. Fort Huachuca, what's that? That is on the Mexican border. That's Charlie Kirk. And what's Charlie Kirk? Charlie Kirk is companies like BlackRock and Blackstone doing exactly the same type of thing that happened to me, right? Taking him out in a honeypot scheme and replacing him with different management. It happened to me. You know what they were hawking through Charlie Kirk's organization? Loan refi. I've got it right here, something. The company's called Y Refi. right? This little trap. And this is a scheme. And what they do is they try to get kids to give up their federal student loans that are cheaper, and they work a deal where it gets refied, and all of a sudden the kid is getting screwed, right? And getting their parents' home foreclosed on or whatever to get that money. But it's a scheme, and Appfolio is a scheme. Like I say, since I learned Carol Bloom works there and that my brother's company is a partner there, this company has lost $2 billion of market value. And I believe it will go all the way down to nothing, right? It's at 8 billion now. And that's what I spend my time doing, Theo. I've learned to look at the SEC filings and to understand them. And now I can see that the corporations with $1 billion in their pockets are the ones that are doing this. And they're targeting guys like me before the kids are even born.
Yeah. And they're also doing a lot of this, like with BlackRock and stuff. They're doing a lot of it in the probate courts. They're doing it in the divorce courts. And they're basically like stealing properties, using the receiverships, and then they sell it back to themselves for like dirt cheap. And then they flip it and make a huge profit.
And they're just as happy to do it to you as they are to me. It has nothing to do with my gender. It has nothing to do with my religion. It has nothing to do. All these are elite criminals, and they come from all religions.
Yeah, and there's two things that make you more of a target. Number one, you report abuse, especially sexual abuse of children. Number two, you have money or assets, or they think that you have money or assets. Those two things make you a high level target in this kind of situation. And you mentioned before, these things are doing fraud. Like the Family Court Warrior fraud project that David Weigel is doing is also doing fraud. And I don't know where he's getting all this money from, but he supposedly has money and investors and everything into his nonprofit, and he pays Richard Luthman $3,000 a month in a salary to be his personal publicist. So he has him on payroll, and basically all he's done is essentially just try to get more donations, more money, raise more money. And then every once in a while, he'll pay for somebody to do a drug test, or he'll pay for somebody to do this or that. But he's making so much money. And I hear that he's going out, taking his ex-wife to dinner and all this all around New York City, saying, oh, don't worry, I'll just swipe the nonprofits card. I'll just charge it to the nonprofits credit card. Don't worry, this is a business expense. And it's not a business expense.
Yes, and before you know it, essentially it's what happened to Charlie Kirk. The organization isn't really trying to spread the word of Jesus Christ at all.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, the political differences that Lizzie mentioned, probably because she never liked Richard Luthman, and he's a disbarred attorney convicted of extortion and kidnapping. So it's like these people aren't big shots; they're low lives who are rejects of society that lost because he pled guilty to kidnapping and extortion. How could anyone respect him?
Let me tell you another story. I came across a video, YouTube, and it was a guy named James Dean in Fort Lauderdale. And he is a decorated Marine. And so, of course, just like I contacted Elizabeth Weinstein and David Weigel and Richard Luthman, I contacted James Dean and I said, hey, man, let's get together. And we did. We got together at Dave & Buster's in Doral, Miami, Florida. And he started telling me that I should, make all this progress pro se, and started sending me some things to say pro se. And then all of a sudden, he told me that I should talk to this other woman. And that woman is Samantha King. he gave me the number of the exact person who was in my house trying to kill me.
They're all in on it.
Yeah. In other words, James Dean essentially has a business now where he finds people who are looking to tell their story, and he tries to probably get them to say something like, I'm feeling homicidal, right? And then all of a sudden the police all show up at your door and you're taken away, right? Because that is precisely what Samantha King was doing. She was in my house. She told me that she had a child, her 9-year-old was taken by Judge Frank Ledet. And so we would get together and work on our cases. And I noticed she wanted to use my computer. And I was like, where? I never let anybody use my computer. And so I set her up her own account on my computer that I don't use. And that's just a guest account. It's benign. And she seemed uninterested in that computer. But it was really weird. She came over to my house about 8 times. And I've saved every single communication, but I think she was a paid lawyer or investigator. She was paid to get into my house. But on one, I'm very perceptive of what people say and the words they use. She turned to me and she said, I'm just so frustrated. I'm feeling homicidal. Homicidal? I'm feeling homicidal, she said. I'm feeling homicidal towards the judge.
She wanted you to be like, yeah, me too.
Yeah, exactly. She wanted, yeah. And so that was really weird. And, I never, I only had 2 drinks with her. So I was very careful about what I
tried to bug your house. She probably tried to put surveillance in your house.
Exactly. Well, get this. Then all of a sudden she whips out 4 hypodermic needles. And guess what? There's 4 people in total in the house, right? My daughter was there and with her friend. And she pulls out 4 hypodermic needles and says that she's taking Thrive or some shit like that, and that it's really, really good for you.
Wow.
It's vitamin therapy.
So she's trying to offer it to you right then and there?
Yeah. It looked like a fentanyl needle.
Probably was.
Right? Yes. Yeah. So anyway, she fucking sticks it in her arm and she ends up passed out on my goddamn porch. Yeah, in my front yard. And so I had to get my daughter, because I knew everything's a setup.
Yeah, you didn't even want to touch her at all.
I didn't want to touch her at all. So I got my daughter and her friend to put an arm under each arm and drag this lug into my house and put her in a bed that wasn't my room. We put her in his room and nobody else. She slept until 3:00 the next day.
And then she woke up?
Yeah. Well, she was awake. I made sure my daughter made sure she was breathing, right?
And what she said,
I knew that everything was fine. She acted like a typical liar. You know why 3:00? Because she probably sat in that room for 3 solid hours trying to figure out how she was going to pull off the lie. Right?
Yeah.
It's hard. It's very, 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 very high level work to try to kill somebody in their own home. Right? And this is the work of lawyers. She was there to kill me. No question. Samantha King. So yeah, it's wild.
Where do things stand for you now? What are you up to? Are you working or?
Well, I'm retired. So I made $1 million a year. So I've got a decent retirement, not from my company, but from Social Security. I literally paid so much goddamn money into Social Security for so many years. Anyway, that's a decent amount of money. Our house is cheap. And the receiver gives me $6,000 a month. So I've got just enough money to do what I need to do. And I have so much wonderful evidence, right, that I've got them. They know I've got them. Appfolio knows I've got them. It's just a matter of time. And I'm really, really, really good at this. So this is what I do. I kind of work on my case right now. I've got, I just filed this last night. It's, so I was working on Sunday, but it's a nice 60-pager or so. And it is a petitioner's motion to compel immediate production of corporate financial records and verified receiver accounting and for protective relief regarding unauthorized tax filings and payments. The LSWG firm in Frederick, Maryland filed a 1040 in my name for 2024, and they're not my lawyer.
They signed it. They signed
yes,
it.
yes.
Wow.
They signed it for me. And they're not a power of attorney. They're not, but Edmund Gregory is also with that firm, and it was my corporate accounting firm. But he basically, from the day Edmund Gregory joined my company to be my CPA, my outside public accounting firm, he was there. He was invited to steal my company from me. Period. So he signed an agreement to be my CPA in 2018, and he knew that his real job was to steal everything I worked for 40 years, and that he was going to make that happen with my own lawyer, Ronald Cantor, my own executives, Carol Bloom and Justin Evans, and my new chief financial officer, Adele Musa, who became the receiver. The judge made him the receiver. My chief financial officer made him the receiver, and that means an officer of the court. And so then this guy who is an officer of the court made himself an officer of my company.
And have you ever tried filing like a IRS form 211 or 3949A?
I did file a 14039, and that is identity theft, because when they filed this fake form, that not only did they file the fake 1040, they made a $232,000 payment in my name.
With your money.
Right? With my money, right?
Wow.
All while saying I can't afford a lawyer.
Right? And I can't believe that even now they're still giving you 6,000 or whatever and operating your business without you. Like, that's just insane.
And not only that, look at the money they're making, because Justin makes $400,000 a year. Justin, and he's my employee, right? So Justin in 2024, he made $405,000. And Kevin Martin made $264,000, and Adele made $273,000.
Because there's also like Form 211, which you can do like a whistleblower complaint, and they open like a criminal investigation in the IRS, and then the Form 3949A as well for tax law violations by an individual, business, or both. So if you haven't done those specific ones, because I've like made complaints in the past, and they said, only if you include that form and do it like that, then they give you a case number and they do a real investigation. And if they find that they violated laws and stuff and they retrieve the money, you also get a reward. You get some of the money back.
Yes. And so I agree. And I am taking further steps. I think the IRS is one of my best angles, because what they did is they basically told the IRS that my business is worth nothing, and that's why I can't pay this money.
Yeah. And they're doing wire fraud. They're doing so many like violations of law and tax law that the IRS for sure will look into this with real evidence. If you
But under normal circumstances, they don't. It's important to understand that the IRS doesn't care if a guy like Alex Murdaugh lies. The IRS allows lawyers and CPAs to make up any lie they want. That's the deal. That's why we're 38 trillion in the hole because the IRS likes to get ripped off. And the IRS is happy to let lawyers and CPAs do it. They don't let a private party do it. They let law firms and CPAs do it.
Well,
so
probably it's probably best not to say too much about your future plans of what you're going to do, but
I'll tell you, I am suing Cornell Abod, CPA with CPA bod. He knows he did this. And I'm suing Edmund Gregory and, of course, Dwight Baumgardner with the LSWG firm. And those are Maryland lawsuits. They had no
court or federal.
They had no business trying to steal my business while I lived in Florida, right? From up here in little old Maryland. And I'll tell you, Maryland, I think I'm in a good position here because the real problem they have is Appfolio, because it's $8 billion. And I promise you that these billionaires like Maurice Duca and Klaus Schauser are saying, make him stop. They've caught us. They've caught us, right? Because these are billionaires committing crime. And they didn't want some little $50 million deal to take them down, right? I'm nobody to them. So
after a certain point, you start to know too much about too much, and then you're a target. But sure. Would you want anybody else from Florida who's had the same who's had involvement with any of the same lawyers or any of the same judges or any of these people you named? Would you encourage those people, other victims, to reach out to you and share their experience?
Absolutely. This will be something that I'm very good at for the rest of my life. And there's no taking that away, just like Elizabeth Weinstein. And it's the same thing I said to David Weigel. I said, it's like popcorn, man. You just put whatever is going to pop, it's going to pop. And, in other words, you're going to see typically, if the story is worthy, it's going to rise to the top, right? Elizabeth Weinstein has a story that is worthy, and they needed to take her out, and they did.
It's sad how they're trying to claim there was no foul play and that there was no problem with what happened, but I don't believe that. I don't think anyone believes that.
And guess what? Is the Alexander brothers? That's another. It's just like this. These are the top real estate agents who were selling real estate in New York and Miami, and friends of Trump. The whole thing. These guys were trafficking women through the Douglas Elliman real estate, group. I mean, they were trafficking women. And now the lead plaintiff is dead.
Wow.
And they're going on trial. And guess where she died? She died in Australia. Same place Virginia Roberts Guthrie died. Right? Because this business is international. Right? They wanted my Philippines business. Right? That's all. When I started my Philippines business, I had to get approved by the Secretary of State. Condoleezza Rice signed these forms, right? And they had my name on it. And these people swooped in and they took my Philippines business away from me. And they took Go Current from me, which is a application that my staff had developed for 10 years. And my guess is that is precisely what Appfolio is using now in their organization to collect on rent debts, right? It's a product that was developed in my business. It's a product that Carol Bloom asked me if I'd give her when she was leaving in 2018. And I said, God, Carol, what a weird thing to ask, right? Why would I give you the future of my company, right? Well, little did I know, but she was going to work for Appfolio. And they needed to kill me, right? So, it's wild. And, I would encourage people to contact me. I'm Michael Sobota at mac.com. This is the subject I'm most interested in. I want justice. I want justice for you. I want justice for Marianne Petrie. I want justice for my children. I want justice for Philip Niles, right? And my own children were so courageous that they have spoken out. I mean, they testified. They didn't mince words.
And they're adults now, right?
No, they're just 5, 6, and 7.
Okay.
Right. They're just 5, 6, and 7, and they're current. They're essentially party favors. They're exactly what Diddy was talking about. They're exactly what Epstein talks about. And the only way you can do this is if you have a willing mother, right? And willing police and willing judges.
Or willing father, because that's in my case.
Yeah, or willing father. That was what Elizabeth Harding Weinstein experienced. Is her husband, Brian Stryker Weinstein, was willing to exploit the children sexually.
Yeah, and it's a big, huge issue. And the United States is the #1 supplier of child human trafficking worldwide, globally, and a lot of it comes from CPS and these foster care pipelines and everything like that. But I want to thank you
thank you.
Your experience and giving all of this information to us today. And again, your email is Michael, and then how do you spell your last name?
Sobota.
Sobota at mac.com.
Mac.com, yes.
Okay. And are you also on Facebook and other socials?
I am. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And I'm on YouTube. So.
Okay, awesome. And
I enjoy it.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to say just to leave our audience with as a closing piece?
Watch the stock market. Appfolio is part of a house of cards that includes NVIDIA, and all that is a big scheme. It's a big financial scheme, circular investing. And so the stock market is about to crash so hard, with these people, running these schemes. And it's time to, what that means is opportunity. So there is opportunity to do the right thing because we have to. The money's already gone. We're $38 trillion in debt and running a $2 trillion deficit. So we are as broke gets. And the only way out of that is for people to get back to hard work and accountability. So better times are ahead. They have to be.
Well, thank you so much again. I really appreciate you coming on. And
thank you.
Anybody who wants to contact Michael as sharing your story or just to speak to him, feel free to send him an email or reach him on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.